Hey guys, Griffin here, and today I want to talk about Reliquary of Souls. Now the reason I wanted to make a video just about this is because I myself was under the impression that you need a warrior tank for this, but you don't. So I decided to not only completely understand the fight, but share it with you guys so you have a clear understanding of the fight as well. Now this fight is actually a little complicated because of the phases, so I'm going to break down each phase, and by the end you should have a clear picture of how it all works. So let's go ahead and get into it. So before the fight even begins, there's what's called a Gauntlet. That name gives it too grand of a title. It's a hallway with rapidly respawning mobs that die pretty quickly. I recommend, however, doing the encounter explaining part prior to the Gauntlet, because once you go in, it's hard to not pull the boss after it. However, there is a safe spot where you can be out of the Gauntlet and not pull the boss. I'll put it on the screen here. This is a great place to top off your tanks before the boss pull. When running the Gauntlet, hug the right wall, grab the adds, and do not drop totems or hunter traps. The adds will keep coming during the boss fight if you leave anything up there and can definitely cause a wipe. Okay, let's talk phase 1. So you run in and you fight the boss, but first I recommend taking him in the middle of the room away from the ramp so nobody is standing on the ramp and accidentally pulling adds from the Gauntlet. Now phase 1, you cannot heal, which is why it's important you head into this fight full on health. There is no threat table in phase 1. The person standing closest to the boss will get fixated, and you can swap tanks simply by sliding out from under them a little bit and having someone else go to the dead center of him. The fixate can take up to 5 seconds to swap targets, so plan accordingly and don't panic if it doesn't happen right away. Once the first tank gets to half health, the next tank should move in and take the fixate. It doesn't matter the order of tanks here, but I recommend 3 tanks plus a rogue ready with evasion. The boss is going to enrage after 45 seconds for 15 seconds. This is a cast, so you'll have some warning, and that's where we have the rogue take over. If they do it right, they'll take no damage while evasion is up. If evasion ends and the boss is still up, any tank that still has decent health should take over, or if you have a warrior DPS, have them throw on a shield and hold it for a second. Now if you don't have a rogue to evade the enrage, don't worry, just make sure you save a tank specifically for this part to make sure nobody dies. The goal is survival for the tanks, and this will be a DPS check, so just kill the boss before he kills the tanks. Healers should be using Power Word Shield, Pain Suppression, Blessing of Sacrifice, and Mass Dispelling Soul Drain. But other than that, just DPS along with the other casters. Don't worry about mana, because between each phase you'll get topped off when the adds come out, and they do very little damage. As a warrior or druid tank, you should be using these adds to top off your rage too. Phase 2. For the most part, this is a tank and spank. There are 2 main abilities to worry about: Deaden and Spirit Shock. Deaden increases damage taken by 100%, and Spirit Shock is a damage and temporary stun to the tank. Both can be interrupted, but if you want, Deaden can instead be spell reflected by a warrior for extra damage for the boss for 10 seconds. Now, Rune Shield needs to be spell stolen by a mage, or have a warlock have a fell hunter eat it. Mages have to be fast, because while the shield is up, you can't interrupt the other 2 spells. Now the whole time there's an aura that will make you take 50% of the damage you do back to you. So DPS has to be careful here. However, this also boosts the healing from healers by 100%. On top of that, it slowly reduces your mana pool until you eventually have no mana left over 160 seconds. So phase 2 is also a DPS check. Now if you don't have a warrior tank to reflect, don't worry. Just have your interrupters. I recommend a nice rotation of shaman. Just interrupt that one too. It doesn't really change the fight to interrupt it, though you do lose a 100% boost to damage for 10 seconds. You also simplify the interrupts, which we found made the whole phase much easier. If the tank gets hit by Spirit Shock, you can have your other tanks as second threat to tank temporarily, and if the tank gets deadened, I'd recommend the tank stop hitting to reduce the damage taken and let the healers know to watch the tank. That's it for phase 2. He'll go back in the ball, and you guys all get your mana pools back with your ad spawning. Last phase is actually easy if you start it correctly. You'll need 2 tanks to make this easy: an opener tank and a main tank. First, you want the opener tank to open with some big threat, and as soon as they do their threat combo, have the main tank taunt. Now every time this guy changes aggro targets, he gets a buff that increases his attack speed, but everyone that isn't the threat target also gets a debuff, increasing their threat gain by 200%, so you don't want to swap tanks other than the initial swap. The reason you do the initial swap is so that the main tank gets the threat gain debuff from the opener tank, because they weren't the initial tank. And then when the main tank taunts, it reapplies the debuff to everyone else, but the main tank has a huge threat lead, and most of that debuff is still left, so everyone is all on the same level of threat rate. After the main tank taunts, this is when you'll want to misdirect to the main tank while the hunters have the increased threat debuff as well. As a tank, the only other thing to worry about is Soul Scream. which will hit 5 targets in front of the boss. So if you position away from everyone, just the tank will get hit. For Soul Scream, the tanks will want to keep their rage/mana as low as possible because you take 100 damage per point of rage you have and 0.5 damage for every 1 mana. Stance dancing and power shifting are good ways to lower your rage, while paladins don't have to worry as much because even at 6,000 mana, they'll only take 3,000 damage. Now if a warrior or a bear is full rage, they're taking 10,000 damage. Now you do not want anyone to pull off the tank even for a second, so hunters that do their feign after pulling aggro are going to cause some serious problems here. So call out anyone above 80% threat and don't be afraid to salve your hunters. There's also an aura that increases damage and ticks higher and higher through this phase, but also increases damage taken, so your healers are going to start to feel it after a while and your threat meters are going to get crowded really fast. Again, a nice DPS check to finish off the encounter. Now, as far as tank comp goes, it's not going to matter that much. Warriors will have a slight advantage spell reflecting in phase 2, but isn't necessary, and paladins should have an easier time in phase 3 due to Soul Scream doing less damage, but we did it with a druid main tanking every phase and it worked fine. When we had a warrior, we actually had a problem with accidentally interrupting Deaden or the warrior failing to have a shield block up for it. Honestly, the most beneficial class was the rogue with evasion. As usual, I did make a weak order for bears and warriors to alert them during phase 3 when the rage is too high, so if that's something you might want to try out, go ahead and hop on my Wego profile and download it and let me know how it goes. That's all I've got for Reliquary. If there are any cool strats you know of you'd like to share, or if you just have questions about this fight or other fights in Black Temple or Mount Hyjal, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and as always guys, take care.